It was 7:13 in the morning when two police cruisers rolled up my driveway, red and blue lights flashing like a nightmare I didn't order. The lead officer's hand hovered near his holster, eyes sharp, like he expected me to start a war. Me? I was standing there in my slippers holding a mug of coffee with the Army Corps of Engineers logo, watching steam curl into the cool air. Across the street, 40 feet away, stood her, Dedra Kensington, the self-proclaimed queen of Pinewood Estates. Sunglasses on, arms crossed, a smug little smirk on her face like she'd just conquered Rome. 4 hours earlier, she had called 911 and told them a dangerous squatter was refusing to leave her property. That squatter was me, a 54-year-old veteran who'd bought this land 6 months ago, paid in full, with the deed framed and hanging inside my living room. What Dedra didn't know was that I held a single sheet of paper that would flip her entire empire upside down. For more interesting stories, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. My name's Garrett Hollands, 54, divorced, 2 grown kids in college and med school. I spent 20 years serving in the Army Corps of Engineers before retiring to start a small consulting firm in Tulsa. I wasn't looking for drama. I'd had enough of that overseas. All I wanted was peace, a workshop, and the smell of motor oil and sawdust instead of gunpowder and diesel. So when I found 3.2 acres on the quiet edge of Pinewood Estates, it felt perfect. Big oak tree out front, 150 years old, its branches groaning like an old ship in the wind. A detached garage perfect for my machines. I signed the papers, paid in full, and moved in 6 months ago. According to the 2018 county survey, my land was outside the HOA boundary, 200 feet outside, to be exact. I made sure of that before signing anything, because I've heard the horror stories. HOAs fining people for mailbox colors, gnomes or grass too tall by half an inch. Enter Dedra Kensington, 49, real estate agent, HOA president, and the kind of woman who used pastel suits as armor. She drove a white Lexus with a license plate that literally said HOA QN. She called it leadership. I called it a warning. Stories about her were already circulating. Families fined for chalk drawings, retirees threatened with foreclosure, and her infamous rule about approved landscaping color palettes. But what really made my blood boil was how she treated people. The working class folks, the minorities, the older veterans. If you didn't fit her country club aesthetic, you were a problem to be removed. 2 weeks after I moved in, I got a certified letter. The envelope had that heavy official texture. Inside, I'm a fine for $2,500. Unauthorized structure, it said. The structure? My garage, which had stood here long before the HOA even existed. I emailed back, polite but firm. Attached my deed, my survey, even a statement from a paralegal friend proving my property was legally outside HOA jurisdiction. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 3 weeks later, Dedra showed up in person, clipboard in one hand, designer sunglasses glinting in the Oklahoma sun. She snapped photos of my property like she was solving a crime, told me my attitude set a bad precedent and that I'd regret resisting the community. I told her to leave. By week 5, I got another letter, this one for $5,000 with $150 in daily penalties. The words foreclosure proceedings were underlined twice. That night, my neighbor Reuben came by with 2 beers and 60 years of wisdom. "Buddy," he said, "that's how they win. They drain your wallet till you give up." I called Lucia Brennan, a local attorney I once helped with a flood drainage project for her mom's house. She owed me a favor, and when she heard the story, her voice turned cold. "They filed a boundary correction without notifying you. Garrett, that's illegal. That's straight-up fraud. Apparently, right around the time I bought my land, the HOA had quietly redrawn its map to include my property. No letters, no hearings, no public notice. They just decided I was theirs." Lucia told me to sit tight. "Don't pay, don't sign, and whatever you do, document everything." So I did. Every letter, every email, every unwanted visit, because something in my gut told me Dedra wasn't done. Then came that morning, 7:13 a.m. The flashing lights, the coffee mug trembling in my hand. Dedra watching from her Lexus like she was about to see me hauled off in cuffs. The lead officer introduced himself as Sergeant Pacheco. Solid guy, mid-40s, calm but wary. "We got a report of trespassing and a verbal threat made against the HOA president," he said. I almost laughed. On my own land? But I didn't. Instead, I set my mug down, moved slow, and told him I had proof. I went inside, grabbed a folder thick with documents, my deed, survey, emails, timestamps, even a photo of Dedra trespassing on my driveway. I laid it all out on the hood of his cruiser. He reviewed every page, compared it to the county plat map on his phone, and finally looked up. "Ma'am," he called out to Dedra, "this isn't trespassing. This is a civil dispute. You'll need to handle this in court." Her perfect smile cracked. "I pay your salary," she shouted. Pacheco didn't blink. "And I don't enforce HOA bylaws." She stormed off, tires screeching, ego dented. The sergeant handed me his card. "Off the record? Document everything. This isn't over." And he was right. That morning wasn't the end of Dedra's crusade. It was the beginning of a war, one that would drag a whole community into the light and expose just how rotten an HOA can get when power goes unchecked. If you've ever had your own nightmare HOA experience, tell us in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video to help more homeowners stand up for their rights. When the police cruisers left my driveway that morning, the neighborhood fell silent again. But I knew it was the kind of silence that comes before another storm. The smell of burnt rubber from Dedra's Lexus still lingered in the air, a reminder that she'd just tried to weaponize law enforcement against me. Most people would have backed off at that point, maybe even paid the fine just to make it stop. But 20 years in the Army teaches you one thing: you don't surrender ground that's rightfully yours. I called Lucia the moment I got back inside, told her everything that happened, every word, every detail. She didn't even sound surprised. "Garrett," she said, "if she's lying to the police, she's desperate. Desperation means she's hiding something." By the next morning, Lucia had drafted a cease and desist letter. It was direct legal firepower at its finest, demanding the HOA withdraw all fines and threats or face a lawsuit for harassment and malicious prosecution. She also filed a complaint with the county, exposing the fraudulent boundary change Dedra had pulled off. Under Oklahoma law, any annexation like that needed certified mail to the affected property owners. I'd never received one, which made their entire claim invalid. For the first time in weeks, I felt a little relief. But I also knew people like Dedra didn't fold easily. Sure enough, Ruben told me that same evening she'd called an emergency HOA board meeting, ranting about a squatter attacking our authority. Her little circle of yes men voted to pursue all legal remedies. In plain English, that meant she was going to double down. 2 days later, I was in the hardware store when a young couple from the neighborhood approached me. Travis and Mallory Kent. Nice folks, probably mid-30s. Mallory held their toddler while Travis looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Garrett," he said, "we heard you got a lawyer. Can she help us too?" They told me Dedra had fined them $8,000 for installing a swing set without approval. A swing set. Their story wasn't unique. Turns out 9 other families were drowning in fines and liens for the same nonsense. That's when I realized this wasn't about me anymore. Dedra wasn't just bullying one homeowner. She was running a full-blown scam. That night, Ruben and I sat on my porch, beers in hand, watching the moon rise over the oak tree. "You know what Dedra's problem is?" I said. "She's got mall cop syndrome. Thinks the HOA badge gives her power." Ruben chuckled. "Nah, brother. She's got yacht club energy in a backyard pool neighborhood." We laughed, but underneath the humor was a shared anger. Moments later, my phone buzzed, an unknown number, with a picture of my truck parked outside Home Depot. The caption read, "We're watching." I showed it to Lucia. Her voice turned deadly serious. "Install cameras. Tonight." I'd dealt with worse threats overseas, but something about this suburban power play made my blood boil. I installed 6 cameras around the property, set up cloud backups, and kept every document in a digital log. A week later, The HOA officially filed a lawsuit against me, a declaratory judgment demanding enforcement of their covenants. Their claim? That the corrected plat map filed after I moved in was legally binding. Their attorney, a guy named Conrad Trimble, was the type who probably advertised on late-night TV between used car commercials. Lucia hit back immediately with a motion to dismiss and a counterclaim for fraud, harassment, and abuse of process. That's when discovery began, and things started to unravel for Dedra fast. Lucia subpoenaed every financial record, every board meeting note, every transaction under Dedra's name. It didn't take long before the rot showed. The so-called corrected plat map had never been properly noticed. No certified letters, no homeowner vote, nothing. Legally, it was worthless. And then Lucia's paralegal found something worse. Over $140,000 missing from HOA accounts. Dedra's LLC had been quietly billing the HOA for management services, even though the neighborhood already paid an outside management company. She was paying herself with homeowners' money. That wasn't a power trip anymore. That was theft. The discovery set off a spark in the neighborhood. Mallory hosted a quiet backyard meeting one Friday night. 11 families showed up, all with horror stories of their own. Fines for solar panels, threats for unapproved patio chairs, even one elderly man facing foreclosure over $400 in late fees. I looked around that circle and realized this wasn't just about boundaries or paperwork anymore. This was about standing up to a system that had forgotten who it was supposed to serve. Lucia was there too, blending in like a neighbor, but her voice was clear when she spoke. If we can prove these actions were coordinated, we can build a class action. You're stronger together than you ever will be alone. The next morning, the retaliation began. Dedra called another emergency meeting and pushed through a special assessment fee, $1,000 a month for any homeowner who disrupted community harmony. Within 24 hours, I and 5 others received the notice. It was extortion dressed as policy. Then one night, my doorbell camera caught a white Lexus pulling up to my driveway. The next morning, someone had spray-painted the word "deadbeat" across my garage door in bright red. The paint stank of chemicals and hate. I sent the footage to Lucia and to Sergeant Pacheco. He called back that afternoon. File a vandalism report. And keep your cameras rolling, Mr. Hollands. You're dealing with a cornered snake. I spent the next week scrubbing the paint off, one rough stroke at a time, wondering what Dedra's endgame really was. But the truth came soon enough. Lucia called one morning, her tone equal parts anger and excitement. "Garrett, you need to see this," she said, emailing me a spreadsheet. It showed 3 homes foreclosed by the HOA in the last 2 years, all bought back at half price by Dedra's LLC or her board members' family trusts, then flipped for massive profits. It wasn't just greed, it was organized fraud, maybe even racketeering. "We're adding RICO allegations," Lucia told me. "This stops being civil once you cross that line." That night I sat in my workshop with the machines quiet for once, the smell of sawdust hanging heavy in the air. I looked at the old oak tree outside and thought about the families losing their homes over paint colors and paperwork. Dedra thought she'd broken me, but all she'd done was wake up a man with nothing left to fear. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was a fight for everyone who'd ever been crushed under the weight of fake authority. And as I drafted a statement for Lucia to send to the court the next morning, one thought kept circling my mind. If Dedra wanted a war, then she was about to get one. Have you ever dealt with an HOA that crossed the line? Share your story below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Your story might just help someone else fight back. When the lawsuit hit full swing, Dedra must have thought she could drown me in paperwork. But she didn't count on how stubborn a man gets when he's got truth on his side. Weeks turned into months of depositions, hearings, and endless filings. Every time Lucia presented another piece of evidence, Dedra's lawyers squirmed a little more. The missing funds, the fake property annexation, the hush-hush deals with her own company. It was all right there in black and white. What started as a petty neighborhood dispute had evolved into something bigger, uglier, and far more dangerous. I wasn't just fighting for my land anymore. I was fighting to expose an entire system that thrived on fear and manipulation. The harassment didn't stop. One evening, I noticed new code violation stickers slapped across my mailbox and garage. The HOA's so-called inspectors even climbed my trash cans to peek over my fence. Every act of intimidation only made me more determined. Ruben caught one of them on video trespassing and sent it straight to Lucia. She smiled the next day when she called me. "They just documented their own crimes," she said. "Keep the cameras rolling." For every attack, Lucia had a counterpunch ready. Her paralegal tracked down invoices linking Dedra's personal account to HOA funds. Another discovery request exposed that 3 board members had purchased foreclosed homes using HOA money. Piece by piece, the picture formed, a web of deceit that reached far beyond Pinewood Estates. Then came the day Lucia called and said, "You're not going to believe this. The HOA itself is in foreclosure." Turns out the association had taken out a massive construction loan years earlier to finish amenities and hadn't made payments in nearly 2 years. The bank was repossessing the common property. Clubhouse, pool, parks, everything. I remember sitting there at my workbench, staring at the phone, and feeling something click in my head. "Lucia," I said slowly, "what happens if I buy the property?" There was a pause on the line, then her voice, half shocked, half amazed. "Then Garrett, you'd own the land the HOA needs to exist." The plan came together faster than either of us expected. I called my brother Caleb, a developer in Texas. He wired me a loan to cover the bid. Mallory wrote an article for the Tulsa Gazette about the corruption and the upcoming auction, and within days, donations started pouring in from across the country. People who'd fought their own HOA nightmares sent messages of support and money. By the time the auction date arrived, we had the full amount ready. The morning of the sale, Dedra showed up outside the courthouse. No makeup, hair a mess, desperation all over her face. "Please," she said, "don't do this. If you buy it, I lose everything." I just looked at her and said, "You should have thought about that before you turned your neighbors into victims." The auction itself was surreal. The auctioneer read the legal description in a dull monotone, and when he called for bids, no one spoke. I raised my paddle, 875,000. Silence. Once, twice, sold. Just like that, I owned Pinewood Estates' common property. Dedra screamed that it was illegal, but the auctioneer didn't even look up. "Public sale," he said flatly. "Anyone can bid." As I walked out with the deed in hand, reporters asked how it felt. I told them the truth. Feels like justice. That clip went viral within hours. Owning the land meant one thing: I could petition the court to dissolve the HOA. Lucia moved fast, filing for dissolution on grounds of insolvency and fraud. Meanwhile, Dedra's world crumbled. Her attorney quit, 2 board members resigned, and the last few tried to run damage control online. Then, the morning of the hearing, Dedra showed up with a new lawyer who looked barely out of law school. The courtroom was packed with homeowners and TV crews. Lucia presented the evidence: the fake annexation, the stolen funds, the foreclosures, every last dirty trick. Dedra tried to interrupt, calling it all lies, but the judge wasn't having it. And then, right in the middle of her outburst, a detective entered the courtroom. He handed the judge a folder. The judge looked up and said, "Ms. Kensington, there's an active warrant for your arrest." The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear the handcuffs click. Dedra's face went white. "You can't do this," she shouted, twisting toward me. "You ruined my life." I didn't say a word. The officer led her out, her voice fading into the hallway. The judge straightened her glasses and said, "Well, that was instructive. Petition for dissolution is granted." Just like that, it was over. Pinewood Estates HOA no longer existed. Lucia was appointed receiver, tasked with winding down operations and forming a new community trust to manage the property. The courtroom erupted, not in chaos but relief. People hugged, clapped, cried. Ruben lifted me off the ground in a bear hug. Brother, he said, laughing, you took down an empire. Cameras flashed. Reporters swarmed. I told them this wasn't about revenge. It was about freedom. No one should live in fear of the people meant to protect their homes. Outside, Dedra sat in the back of a police car, staring blankly through the window. For the first time, she wasn't in control. In the weeks that followed, the news spread fast. Dedra's board members were arrested for their part in the foreclosure scheme. 3 families who'd lost their homes got them back. Mallory's documentary about the case hit 2 million views in a week and sparked an HOA reform movement across several states. Oklahoma's legislature even proposed a Transparency Act, requiring open meetings and capped fines. They called it Garrett's Law, though I never asked for that. Months later, the community held a gathering in the old clubhouse, now owned by the new Pinewood Commons Trust. We'd repainted the walls, opened the doors, and filled the place with laughter instead of fear. Dues dropped from $385 to $45. Fines were gone, replaced by cooperation. Neighbors who once hid behind curtains now talked freely over coffee. Reuben raised his beer and grinned. To freedom from petty tyrants. I clinked my bottle against his. And to never becoming one ourselves. When spring came, the oak tree in my yard bloomed again, its branches swaying gently in the wind. The same tree that had watched police lights flash and neighbors whisper, now shaded children playing in the grass. For the first time since I bought this land, the air felt clean. I'd come here to build a workshop and find peace. Instead, I helped build a community. Maybe that was always the real mission. If you've ever been through an HOA nightmare, share your story in the comments. Maybe together we can show people they don't have to live under fear disguised as rules. And if you want more real stories of homeowners fighting back, like this video, subscribe and spread the word. Because sometimes standing up for what's right starts with one person refusing to back down.